be talking about Bruce Lee, Budo, and just how classical the message really is.
Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, thank you for the nice introduction and for getting my name right. As I said, I've been called a lot worse in the past, so I'm not worried about that. Hopefully, mine's going to be a little bit different, okay? I'll make no bones about it. I come from a coaching science background. I'm a practitioner. I would say, although I nominally now work as an academic in a university just up the road, the reason I got that job, as my mates often remind me, is I was reasonably good at football as a kid. I was a reasonably good football coach, and I'm able to pass my exams and be a good little boy because I worked hard. But I've also been a practicing martial artist for around 40 years. And when Paul put up the call for papers, I spoke to a good friend of mine who's here tomorrow, George Jennings. I said, George, this is not for me this year. And George said, no, actually, I think it is, because you'll give a different approach, and hopefully, you'll get a bit of debate going, and maybe you'll learn something as well. So George is the reason I'm here. He's convinced me, so blame him. Okay? What I've tried to do here is look basically back at something I read as a teenager, the Black Belt article, Liberate Yourself from Classical Karate. Okay? And at that time, I read it and I found it quite interesting. I didn't really understand it in depth, if I'm honest. But going back there, almost 30 years later, I saw some striking similarities in terms of what I was actually practicing and what I practiced over this time period. Okay? So rather than waffling on, I'll try and get on with it. Okay? So what I did here, I wanted to examine the influence of Bruce Lee in terms of cultural practices within arts where they self-identified either as traditional, I know, I don't like the word either, we'll come to that at the end, or non-traditional. Okay? And I've added there a caveat amongst other things because going down the qualitative approach, which I use quite a lot, as most people will know, I got a little bit carried away and things went a bit nebulous and it went all over the place and it was too fun to stop, if I'm honest. Okay? How I did it? Well, separate focus groups, and I'm really glad they were separate focus groups, as you'll see when we come on to some of the topics I covered. Otherwise, I may have seen some practical application within the two groups. And then analyze them thematically, as I've done in the past, nice easy system. Also, I was given the chance to perform some observational analysis. Quite a lot, actually. I was very lucky in terms of how it worked out. Okay? Good. So as I said, this year is really the crux of what got me interested in doing this. That lovely aesthetic sidekick there, but he's not putting his body weight into it, by the way. So technically, it's not very good. But this as well. I can remember reading about this idea of a classical mess as a teenager. And I was so interested in it at that time, because I'll let you into a little secret. Paul, I think, has the impression of some others previously that I'm very serious about what I do and a sports science guy and everything else. But I mentioned to Dave earlier, the significance of June the 21st, 1981 to you guys is probably nothing. To me, it was my 12th birthday, and it was the first time I saw Enter the Dragon. And I became obsessed, probably for about 5 or 6 years. Absolutely. To the point I can still smell that bedroom, as I said, myself and my mates in there. I can remember the Ferguson video recorder I used, and I can also remember the box that we held that wonderful film in so tightly. Okay? Then I started reading about Bruce Lee. I started reading the Kung Fu Monthly and all these other magazines and so on. And I came upon this idea of a classical mess. At this point, I was deeply involved in a classical mess, if we go on Bruce Lee's ideology. Okay? I was studying traditional karate at that time and enjoying it. However, I didn't believe, even at that time when I was studying it, in what was classed as a classical way. I was already cross-training. I was already mixing things up, and I was already doing things without my teacher's knowledge. Whether or not he knew that, he may do now. Okay? So this got me really interested in this one. This is what I wanted to base it on today. I was so interested in this one, in fact, the little monument he had made for himself. I tried to make one in CDT class. It was refused, and I did enjoy the counselling I received afterwards. It was quite nice. She was a really nice lady, actually. Still remember her now. So I did a bit of research, and I looked around, and I thought, I'm going to forget the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, okay? Because I know it's just a series of notes and so on. I'm not going to go away and look at books by people like John Little and so on. John Little, or John Aldi, sorry for the joke. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look at something he actually wrote himself, which we know, this document from 1971 in Black Belt. Then I started thinking about students, people like Inosanto and so on. These two guys, Inosanto students, yeah? Chris Kent and Tim Tackett. Nice quote there from them, that before Bruce Lee, it was, if you trained in a martial art, you were trained in a traditional martial art. Okay? I'm not sure if I completely agree with that in terms of using that term. So there's a picture, perhaps, of what we would classify as a traditional martial art. Gentleman here, Mabuni Kensei, who's the son of Mabuni Kenwa, founder of one of the major styles of, now seen as Japanese karate, okay, Shitoru. A similar picture I found, which I quite like, of Mr. Lee, probably about 1963, in his traditional gear with Taki Kimura, I think, executing very much a similar technique against a standard karate reverse punch or gyakuzuki, whatever you want to call it, okay? And that got me thinking, okay, just how classical was this stuff? And actually, what similarities were there instead of differences? And that's what I was really interested in, not the differences. I wanted to see what was there originally and what's similar. From my own experience, in an anecdotal way as well, I came back to this. So, when I performed my focus groups, and they were separate, as I said, I was quite lucky. I got good numbers there. I got about 10 in one group and 9 in the other. And I was also able to look at them, and observe them training. Okay? And I asked them about the influence of Bruce Lee, what it had for them initially, what influence was there. So, to try and lighten things up a little bit and not be so serious, I've got my little pictures. So we can see, quite honestly, these are the guys who follow, quite obviously I should say, Bruce Lee's philosophy and teachings and his principles. Now, they all straight away said to me, of course, he's our initial reason we got involved in martial arts. Everybody, isn't that true for everybody of a certain age? Oh, the mean age, by the way, was I think 48.7 or something like that. So around my age, around the time you'd imagine, sort of late 80s, early 80s and so on, video boom guys. They said, of course he's influential. He influenced everybody. And it's an ongoing principle for us. Even today, Bruce Lee influences in his teachings and so on in our practice. They talked about the guiding principles. There was a distinction made between certain groups where they were looking at Jeet Kune Do in a formalized way and looking at principles that they could apply to whatever they did. Okay? Where they were doing some version of Silat, Muay Thai and so on, they could still apply those principles in practice. Someone mentioned earlier about the UFC thing with the father of modern martial arts. They came up with that one straight away. Every single one. Okay? And it was a constant theme running throughout. That Bruce Lee had influenced modern martial arts and was still a huge influence there. Okay? These guys, I think that's supposed to be Daniel-san from Proper Karate Kid, or Best or Kiddo, as my wife calls it. Okay? Some of them admitted there was initial influence, but, and they were quite vehement about this, almost to the point one guy hit the table. They enjoyed the movies, but Eric mentioned about the fantasy of Bruce Lee. Hey, we'll talk about that later, because I saw some fantasies of Bruce Lee going on here, even in the guys in the white pajamas. Okay? They felt they were able to separate that fantasy from reality. They felt that he wasn't relevant, and Bruce Lee, and the impact of Bruce Lee, was no relevance whatsoever in terms of traditional karate that they practiced. That. When I questioned them on what traditional karate was, this is basically the type of stuff we spoke about. Sitting in seiza, or sitting in a kneel position, sorry, in a clean dojo with your white outfit on, your training outfit, your dogi. Okay? No influence whatsoever from Bruce Lee there in their training practices. However, I'll say it now before I forget later on, when I get carried away. When I observed some of the training practices, they went through their formal exercises, their kata, they practiced their basics and so on. Then it came to sparring, kumite time. And what do you think I saw? Well, I saw people bouncing about like this. I was waiting for the guy to flick his nose, okay? So it was there, and it was strikingly obvious to me. But even afterwards, I spoke to them, oh, no, no, no. I was going to say, well, when you're in that left foot fighting stance and you're flicking your left foot up with a roundhouse kick off your front foot, isn't that in some way influenced by Bruce Lee? Not at all. So there was a disconnection there for me between the basics they practiced, the kata, the formal exercise, and the actual application. It looked to me, and if you look at sports karate now, they fight what they call the crab stance, sideways on, where the original roots of the karate would have been more like a southern Chinese martial art, but the Okinawan style, far more similar to Wing Chun with a front forward stance. So there was some, so we say, a little bit of differences there. Okay, some of the themes that came out of the research as I went through. They felt that what they practiced, these Jeet Kune Do principles, or Jun Fan, whichever ones they were relating back to, this modern mixed martial arts, eclectic styles, that it was pressure tested, and that was the key thing in terms of authenticity. Their words, not mine, and credibility. Innovative, of course. We were able to do what we like and move forward and change things. There were no boundaries. It was creative. One of the guys actually said he actually said dojo, which I thought was quite funny. The dojo's name is the creative blah, 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 okay? So he was using a Japanese term in the context of his Bruce Lee principles and so on he was following, okay? There were no limitations. They were constantly evolving. Things were changing all the time, as it should be, in line with the principles that Bruce Lee had set forward, and so on. This one. I did put yada, yada, yada in there, but I took it out because I thought it was being too much. It was like, I've read those books and I'm going to tell you all about it. So they kept quoting this mantra over and over again, okay? To the point where I felt, and I did say to the one guy, have you met him then? Are you Doctor Who? Do you go back in time? In your TARDIS? It was almost, this for me was the impact that he's had on people, that legacy. Right? They were so passionate about these things they'd read about in an article that's what, 50 years old? And a guy who's passed away 45 years ago was still influencing their practice and their methodology today. They talk about it being a complete system as opposed to the traditional stuff, okay? And I'll come back to that one. I've color-coded them and I'm going to go in reverse order. These guys, they talked about, I've used a Japanese term there, sorry, just to remind myself. Reigi means courtesy and politeness within the dojo. They saw that was very, very important. And by the opposite, those guys with the tattoos, and that's what one of the guys said to me, they don't care about stuff like that. They turn up in their gym shorts and they spit in the dojo and they're rude. It's not really Budo. Okay, thank you. I was asking them about the influence of Bruce Lee there. They mentioned the dogi, the white gi was so important. You have to wear that. That's what separated them from these guys who followed this heretic. Again, their words, not mine. There was a hierarchy in place, a clear hierarchy, top dog and so on, and that was important. You needed to know what place you had in the dojo. They had a structured syllabus. Don't worry, okay? Someone asked me that yesterday in work. No, it's not. It means Kihon, basics, kata, formal exercise, and kumite. And again, I've touched on that one. There was a clear disconnection between the practice of Kihon and the practice of kumite, okay? This one was very, very important, okay? Paul talks about authenticity in Beyond Bruce Lee, and the fact that we look for, these guys in some cases, an ancient, wise, Asian, Oriental master. The Orientalism came through very, very clear. The master, as I talked about him, Funakoshi, again, I felt they'd met him. He died in 1957. He was referenced right the way through, okay? Authenticity and the teacher, sensei in Japanese. For these guys, this was incredibly important. For the guys who followed Bruce Lee's ideas, more modern martial artists, they didn't care. Not at all. Now, you do say about it possibly linked into films and so on and carrying through. They didn't see it as relevant at all. They said, what's relevant to us is what happens in our training experience, and we can learn from different people. We don't care if this guy, if there's a clear lineage there, other than the fact, when they contradicted themselves, they talked about, oh, well, this guy trained with Dan and Santo on a number of seminars. Okay, yeah. Maybe once or twice. Okay. The complete system. This one did raise my heckles a little bit. I just want to point this one out. It's a quote, a karate quote from a gentleman called Mabuni Kenwa. So the karate that has been introduced to Tokyo is actually just a part of the whole. The fact that those who learn karate there feel it only consists of kicks and punches, and that throws and locks are only found in judo or jiu-jitsu, can only be put down to a lack of understanding. Okay? Those who are thinking of the future of karate should have an open mind and strive to study the complete art. 1938. This guy was talking about studying complete systems and criticizing people who weren't incorporating grappling and throwing techniques then. Also, if we look at pictures of Mr. Funakoshi's contemporary, that these guys really spoke about at great length as being the opposite of the ideas of Bruce Lee in terms of bringing grappling, striking, and so on together. Here's some pictures of him from a book in 1935, demonstrating a technique called kubiwa, neck ring, quite commonly found in MMA and UFC today. Okay? The interesting thing with this gentleman is when he died and he passed away, that book was reprinted. These techniques were taken out. The only things that were relevant at that time were the kick and the punch of a competition. So the throwing techniques, the grappling techniques, as I wouldn't say popularized, but certainly highlighted then at the Dragon, they were removed. Okay. The pressure testing one was interesting for me. Okay. I may be wrong. Okay. I think that's 1967 in Long Beach. Anyway, am I right? Thank you for nodding. I haven't read your book, by the way, but I will get it. 30 years before that, Mabuni again and his mate actually engaged in a very, very similar practice. But when I spoke to the guys who claimed to follow the Bruce Lee ideals and principles and so on, they said, one of the big differences between us and that traditional stuff is we actually get a gear on and we go for it. That makes a big difference, doesn't it? We pressure test our techniques. Well, these gentlemen were doing that in the 30s. By the way, there's another martial art called Nippon Kempo, or Nihon Kempo, which is, again, developed 1932 in Japan, not widely practiced. My point here in terms of legacy and what Bruce Lee has done for us as martial artists is he's taken away the bullshit. These guys don't have that kind of legacy and influence on people that he had. So every time I see a kid hitting a kicking shield or cross-training in boxing, then I'm grateful for him. And if there's one less drunken monkey master in the world, I'm eternally grateful. I did have a picture there of a cat sitting among some pigeons. I took it out. This was like, whoa, what's going on here, okay? What did he say? Well, kata's just a dance. We know all this. You can't learn anything from kata. It's a waste of time. We aren't robots. Why train like that? When I spoke to these guys on a similar topic, the solo, they were dewy-eyed. The solo karate, moving zen, kata as a teacher, and they talked about bunkai. I watched them demonstrate some bunkai applications, and it looked like a scene from a Bruce Lee movie done badly. Okay? It was choreographed high kicks and throws and so on and sweeps. So very little relevance to the technique they practiced. Actually, if we look at some references to kata, again from Funakoshi and Mabuni. There he is, Mr. Funakoshi, they talked about. Basically what he says there, there's no point in just learning a sequence of kata. It's absolutely useless. And this is seen right throughout his teachings, okay? When he died, when he passed away, sorry, that was taken out. No influence, there was no idea in terms of kata bunkai application. They took that away. It wasn't important. Mabuni says something similar, and I like this one. A kata is not fixed or immovable. Like water, it's ever-changing and fits itself to the shape of the vessel containing it. He's talking there about the individual and their influence on the practice. Where an individual, and I've seen this myself, the embusen or the performance line of the kata, in a Western, a modern idea, a contemporary way of doing things, it's fixed. When I trained in Okinawa, a gentleman said to me, do whatever you like. Do it in a straight line, do it backwards. It's up to you. Mix it up. Find out what works for you, which was quite refreshing, I thought. Okay? This one. The karate guys thought physical conditioning was old school. It was only not relevant in sports karate these days. The Bruce Lee guys thought that it was something that they did that separated them from the karate guys. So there's a great picture of Bruce Lee doing a vertical punch into a wall bag there. Mr. Funakoshi hitting a makiwara. I asked about the use of a makiwara. Oh no, where are we going to put that? It's not practical. So you're going to punch the air? Yes. Because you can develop karate ability in that way, apparently. Okay? Also, he was a keen advocate, as we know, of weight training. He's actually doing some isometric training there, which in terms of strength gains is questionable, but it does make you look cut and great for movies, okay? Seriously, right? I know about this stuff more than anything else. However, I also spoke about this with the traditional guys, and they were quite clear there that it wasn't a part of their training system. Here's an example of some of the tools that are used in an Okinawan dojo. There's many, and they're all functional training tools used to improve strength, grip power, and so on, that are related to the training process, okay? So very, very similar approaches between Bruce Lee's ideology there and the Okinawan guys, going back pre-Meiji era, pre-1864. So lastly, to finish off, okay, I was able to observe the training sessions over a number of days. There was a natural etiquette here. I would have enjoyed being in the class myself. On the other side, it was very, very enforced. Okay? There was obviously the case of the instructor was in charge at all times. There was a nice relaxed atmosphere. There was an oppressive atmosphere. The Kohai Senpai, if you use a Japanese term there, just to remind me, basically senior and junior. The zones of proximal development, the theory there from Vygotsky, an educational theorist, and something I look quite closely at in terms of coaching philosophy for myself in terms of my work. He really looks upon that as a social learning environment for people, okay? Where you can learn from a significant other within the class and so on. That was quite clear within this group, which again is something that should be quite clear within here if we follow the Japanese setting. It wasn't. There was a clear hierarchy and a rank. The teacher, as opposed to the instructor. The teaching was via direct transmission. There was a meaningful interaction and meaningful learning took place between the students. Here, there were line drills, rote learning, okay? A very behavioralist approach. Learning preferences were covered for right across the board. There was question and answers. There was guided discovery. Everybody, even to the point of visual and kinetic learning. Very, very autocratic, single-minded approach. Indeed, a classical mess. Can I keep going? And have my lesson? Simple terminology was used, as you would expect, okay? Very pragmatic approach. Jenglish. I can speak a little bit of Japanese, I'm okay. After 5 years, I should have, okay? This guy, I thought I was watching, it was like a Kurosawa movie, okay? Dubbed badly into a Welsh accent or a Bristolian accent. It was very, very funny, okay? Gets me down to my main point, what I want to get to is the pedagogy. Scaffolding in Hong Kong, I think that's Kai Tak going over the top in the old days, possibly, okay? I talked about Vygotsky's principles here of the zones of proximal development, where we learn best in a social environment. And that can lead us on to interaction to others, to other learning processes that can help us, okay? So it's a structured approach. Scaffolding, which has been popularized by Brunner, Wood and Brunner and their colleagues there, that looks at more how can the teacher give responsibility to the learner? How can they give some empowerment and ownership, but take it away at the right time? And these approaches were very clear in the more modern-minded class, okay? I am getting there, trust me. We know Bruce Lee was a great advocate of an autodidactic approach. There's no help but self-help, blah, 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 all these quotes that we've seen, okay? But really, how could we get there? And that was always my criticism, even as a teenager. How could you get there? How can my experience help me in terms of becoming a better fighter if I've never had a fight? Well, if I live in a rural area like I did as a kid, okay, what am I going to do, fight with a cow? It didn't make sense to me. You need to learn from someone. You need to learn to someone who's been there before and have that. But by all means, as we go along a spectrum, we can become more self-directed in our learning. And I think that's one of the key things in terms of, for me, the legacy of Bruce Lee in terms of pedagogy in martial arts is that idea that, yes, we should be self-directed. And as adults, we should take responsibility for our own learning. Not like the traditional guys who are in their 30s and 40s. And the one guy said, excuse me, can I go to the bathroom, please? Just go, yeah. The conclusion then. I don't like the term traditional. I don't like the term modern. I think what we could be looking at is a spectrum of conformism and non-conformism. We could be looking at, gentleman here, I just grabbed this off Google, okay? Maybe he enjoys shouting us at people every morning and slapping his thighs. I don't know, it's up to him. It's his sandbox and he can play in it. But then we've got these guys. The guy in the middle, the Auto Machida. Now, the traditional guys reference this guy extensively to me as a justification that traditional techniques work. But they work within that context. They fail to mention he cross-trained extensively, okay? And he's a good physical specimen as well. You've also, historically, if we go back, we can talk about someone like this. Miyamoto Musashi. Certainly not a conformist, okay? Someone who died 500 years ago. I'm not going to go into his Gorin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings, and the possible influence on some of Bruce Lee's ideas. But I think we can see there that this idea of conformism and non-conformism and the points in between, you can practice in a traditional way, as I believe I have, but you can be influenced by someone and become a little bit more non-conformist. And as I said earlier, I'm eternally grateful for Bruce Lee for cutting away the absolute junk that was over my eyes at some point and letting me get up there, hit a punch bag, kick a kick shield, and as I said, if there's one less drunken monkey master, I am eternally grateful. I'm not looking at you, Eric, okay? So, sorry, I've run over a little bit, but thank you. Any questions? It's a little bit different.